Hi, I'm David, and I have no idea what I'm supposed to say next. We gotta do that again. I already forgot the first line. Hi, I'm David, and welcome to Convinced of Christianity. We've got a problem. In fact, I'd say it's more like an emergency. As you might have guessed by the name of this channel, I'm a Christian, and we Christians are in the middle of a crisis right now. We're losing, and we're losing bad.
81% of Americans believe in God. That's actually down from 87% 5 years ago.
Study shows for the first time in 80 years, church membership is down significantly.
The decline in church membership is also tied to a growing number of Americans who express no religious preference, growing from 8% in 1998 to 2000 to 21% over the past 3 years.
In recent years, we've started hearing a lot about us now living in a post-Christian world. We started hearing about a major growth in people who identify themselves as dones, nuns, or sums. Dones are people who say they're completely done with religion. Nuns are people who say none when asked what their religious beliefs are. And sums are people who say they believe in something, but they don't quite know what it is. The worst part about all of this is that a lot of these people are former Christians. People who used to be a believer, but have deconverted or deconstructed their faith.
I no longer believe in God.
And I don't know how to reconcile that with the idea of a God that loves us so much he would do anything.
And then this summer you went on Instagram and said essentially, I don't believe. By all the measurements that I have for defining a Christian, I'm not a Christian.
How did this happen? How did we get here? How did we lose all these people? Well, if you listen to some of the stories from people who have left the faith, they all seem to have one thing in common. The majority of these people, not all, but the majority, seem to have had a really faulty foundation for their faith to begin with, or worse yet, had no foundation at all. They had questions, and for whatever reason, they either never got answers, or they got answers that were wrong. I've listened to some of these stories from former Christians who say what they were taught, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, that's not right. I don't believe that. If I believed that, I probably wouldn't be a Christian today either.
We don't do that here.
To be perfectly honest, I actually resonate with a lot of these former Christians because I almost became one of them. Like a lot of them, I was raised as a Christian, and I never felt like I had much of a foundation for my faith growing up either. I had lots and lots of questions, and the only thing I would ever hear in church was, if you died right now, do you know you'd go to heaven? I heard that so many times that it made me want to go home and drink bleach.
My time has come.
I had questions. I had questions about the Bible. I had questions about the church. I had questions about salvation. And I didn't just have questions about the big things either. I had questions about practical everyday things. Things like abortion, sex, end of life, climate change, drugs, gambling, immigration, money, pets, politics, racism, science, even getting a tattoo. And every time I'd ask a question, I'd always get a wide variety of answers, some of which were contradictory. One person actually told me, good church boys don't ask questions. Why not? Why am I not supposed to ask questions? Wasn't it Socrates who said, the unexamined life isn't worth living? Are you afraid of my questions? I'm just looking for the truth. And since all truth is God's truth, the answers will all just eventually lead to Him, right? It actually amazed me how some people got offended at the fact that I simply ask a question. If something can't stand up to scrutiny in the marketplace of ideas, it's not worth believing anyway. Just so we're clear, good church boys and good church girls should absolutely ask questions, because hopefully this means that we take our faith seriously. Your faith should be the most important thing in your life, so why wouldn't you want to know more about it? That's the way I looked at it, at least. And most of the people I talked to were actually really nice and really devout and really sincere. The problem was that their faith seemed to be kind of shallow. It was 1,000,000 miles long. It was maybe only about a ½ inch deep. Hardly anybody ever had any answers to any questions I had, or if they did, it was basically just their personal opinion. I got so sick and tired of hearing people's personal opinions. Is that how this is supposed to work? We all just get to make up our minds? Well, what could possibly go wrong? Never forget what Jesus told us. If you love me, keep my commandments. Notice what Jesus didn't say. He didn't say, if you love me, keep my good ideas. If you love me, keep my recommendations. If you love me, keep my suggestions. He said, "If you love me, keep my commandments." We have commandments that we're supposed to follow. So it might be a good idea to know what those commandments are. Anyway, I didn't know any answers to any of my questions, and hardly anybody else seemed to either. So needless to say, with no firm foundation like a lot of these former Christians, I started having doubts. And I got really disillusioned with faith and religion. I never wanted to be a Christian just because I was raised that way, or that's what I've always been taught. That sounded like a cult. When did I actually decide that this stuff is true? When did I own this? When did I make this faith mine? So I spent several years in a spiritual freefall, a dark night of the soul, if you will. And I started to look elsewhere. I looked at nothing, and then I looked at everything. I looked at atheism first. What would it be like to just completely throw in the towel and live life like God doesn't even exist? Just forget all of this. I looked at agnosticism. Well, I don't know if God exists or not, but we'll never know because he's not knowable. I read the Quran and looked at Islam. I looked at Buddhism. I looked at Hinduism. I looked at Baha'i. I looked at New Ageism. I looked at Scientology. I went to a mosque. I went to a synagogue. I went to a Buddhist temple. And I didn't just look at religion either. I also looked at philosophy. I looked at Aristotle. I looked at Confucius, Hegel, Kant, Nietzsche, Pascal. Like I said, I looked at nothing, and then I looked at everything I could possibly find. And when all was said and done, when all the dust settled and all the smoke cleared, I eventually wound up right back where I started, the gospel of Jesus Christ. But why? What convinced me of Christianity? If you're an unbeliever watching this, thank you for stopping by. You're most welcome here. I used to be on your side too. But if you're a believer, if you're a Christian watching this, I'm on your side now. And it's time for me and you to step it up. Let me ask you a question. Do you know anybody who's left the faith? Any former Christians? Do you know any ex-evangelicals? Anybody who's deconverted or deconstructed? Anybody who's had a faith transition? Do you know any duns, nuns, or sums? I know I do. So now let me ask you this. What makes you think the same thing won't happen to you? If you don't know your faith, if you're not convinced that what we believe is true, what makes you think you won't leave one of these days too? I've heard it said before that we spend too much time preaching to the choir. Here's my response to that. Bullcrap. That may be true in some cases, but in a lot of cases, I'm going to submit to you that the opposite of that is true. We haven't spent enough time preaching to the choir. We've taken the choir for granted. And you know why? Because we're too obsessed with being the biggest and or the richest church in town. All of the emphasis is placed on evangelization, and none, or very little, is placed on discipleship. Here's the deal, campers. Evangelism is monumentally important, but it's just the beginning. Being a disciple comes next. We've had the wedding. Now let's work on the marriage. To our shame, we have neglected the choir, and now the choir is leaving. Do you realize who some of the people leaving the faith are? A couple of those clips we just watched are former pastors. Pastors. Who not only left ministry, they say they don't even believe in God anymore. Kind of makes you wonder where they went to seminary, but then again, the same thing is happening to seminary professors. Some of them are leaving too. And I can't tell you how many former Sunday school teachers and youth ministers I personally know who have left. This is pretty significant, and this should alarm you. Let me give you a statistic. Just here in the United States, over the last 25 years, 40 million Americans have stopped going to any type of religious service. 40 million. That's not nothing. Now, religious services includes mosques and synagogues and things like that, but the vast majority are churches. You realize that if this trend continues for the next 25 years, this is going to be catastrophic. And notice what the problem isn't. The problem isn't evangelism, or a lack thereof. These people have already been evangelized, and somewhere they wouldn't be going to church in the first place. The problem isn't that we need more churches, here, there, and everywhere. We've got plenty of churches. These people were already going to church. The problem is that they stopped going to church. Why did they stop going? There are no doubt several factors, but one of the main ones, if not the main one, is discipleship. Maybe they were going to church, but for whatever reason, they never understood why it was important, so they left. Listen to the words of Jesus again. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Notice again what Jesus didn't say. He doesn't tell us to go make believers. He tells us to make disciples. And one of the reasons that our recruitment is good and our retention sucks is because we're failing to make disciples. If you care anything at all about your faith and the faith of your fellow believers, which could include your spouse, your kids, your grandkids, your siblings, your friends, whoever, and you don't want any of them to leave, you don't have the option of not getting involved anymore. Let's give them some help to fight back. If we don't teach them how to follow Jesus, the world will teach them how not to. Needless to say, we're in a spiritual recession right now. We are in a mellow of a hess, and the numbers are all heading in the wrong direction. But We can either curse the darkness, or we can shine a light. So let's shine a light. This channel isn't designed to be evangelistic, although that's great if it is, of course. This channel is designed to focus on discipleship, on catechesis, on equipping the saints for the work of ministry. We have way too many people out there who claim to be a Christian, but they're as lost as a goat in a hailstorm when it comes to knowing what we believe and why we believe it. They're all about the social side of the faith. But when all the parties, the picnics, and the potlucks come to an end, and they get challenged about their faith, they have no idea what to do, so they leave. This has to change. One of the biggest tactics our enemies try to use against us is that they try to make us look stupid. You know what the solution to that is? Don't be stupid. Know your faith. Stop being a fan of Jesus and start being a follower. I'm giving us a call to action right now. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge us to build a firm foundation for our faith. I'm going to challenge us to have an informed faith, to use our heads and our hearts. The world has to know we're right, and that starts with us knowing we're right. Because if we're not convinced that we're right, how the heaven do we expect to convince anybody else? You can't give what you don't have. Let's learn what we believe and why we believe it so that we're not the next ones out the door. And who knows? Maybe we can convince other people not to leave too. In the next few episodes, the good Lord willing, we're going to completely tear our faith down and build it back up stronger. We're not going to deconstruct our faith. We're going to reconstruct it. If we have any hope at all of keeping our faith has to have a firm foundation. And that has to be built all the way from the ground up. Some of the greatest coaches and players in history have said that the key to mastering their sport was to master the basics, the fundamentals of the game. So that's what we're going to do too.
You karate do gesso. Just like grip.
Now there's no doubt that we already have plenty of social media channels out there already for Christian apologetics. So what makes me think we need another one? Well, here's what me thinks. I am not a pastor. I have never been a pastor. I have never been ordained. I've never received holy orders. I've never been to seminary. I don't have an MDiv or a PhD in any of this, which means I don't have any letters after my last name. So who am I? Well, I'm David, and I'm one of you. I figure most of you watching this aren't in ministry either, so I'm like you. I'm just a lay person who sits in the church pews every Sunday, and I see a need to learn about our faith from our perspective. Not as a member of the clergy, but as one of us. I realize that there are some channels out there that do this already too, but I want to give my take on it. This is too much fun to not get involved. So let's get involved. Let's build a firm foundation for our faith, and let's get convinced of Christianity. Let's learn about how our faith isn't just a bunch of do's and don'ts. It's actually a blueprint to show us how we can actually have our best life now, and where we can maximize our happiness and potential. Don't worry. None of us are expected to be an expert. Even if we wanted to be, we couldn't. None of us are expected to be an expert in the Bible or the church or salvation or things like divine simplicity or the essence energy's distinction of God or substitutionary atonement. A lot of these things are way too complicated for the human mind. However, just because we can't know everything about everything doesn't mean we should know something about something. I don't know how a brown cow eats green grass and makes white milk, but that doesn't stop me from drinking milk. I know how valuable your time is, and I don't take it lightly. That's why, the good Lord willing, most episodes aren't going to be too long, and new ones are going to be posted maybe about every week or so, not too often. I'll try to keep it interesting, but to be honest, some of this is going to be academic. This topic is way too important that we can't afford to take any mental shortcuts. Full disclosure, there are going to be a lot of truth bombs, some of which are probably going to make you a little uncomfortable. You may disagree with some of the things I say, and that's okay. Just be nice, because mean people suck. Even if you're an unbeliever and you disagree with everything I say, your only price of admission for watching this channel is to be nice. Let's face it, everything offends somebody in this day and age. If you don't offend somebody by anything you say, you're probably not saying much. If we disagree about something, let's have a discussion and let's be nice about it. I have a great decoration in my house that has a gentle reminder for how to live life. Be a nice human.
Be nice.
Last but by no means least, this channel is hopefully going to be ecumenical. I know that's a wordy dirt for some people, but I've never understood why exactly. Why is ecumenism a bad thing? Shouldn't we all strive for more unity in the faith? Wouldn't it be nice that when Jesus comes back, he's proud of his church? That does it for now, but there's a lot more to come. If you're a Christ follower and you want to build a firm or firmer foundation for your faith, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I don't know how long this channel is going to last. I guess I'll be here until I run out of ideas. And I don't know how you're watching or listening to this right now, but this channel exists on several different platforms. I mean, it is the 2020s. So if and when I get banned on one of them, just look for me somewhere else. We'll talk again soon. But before you go, take this with you.